Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this panel, Carbon Print in No-Till Systems. My name is Florencia. Sebastian Galbusera is with me. He is industrial engineer and expert in climate change and carbon footprint with many years experience in research and consultancy. He's also professor in the Latin American University on Social Science and 3 de Febrero University. The next colleague that is with us is farmer and member of Aapresid. He actively participates in the carbon footprint projects. In Argentina, in the past few years, the carbon print has become very important thanks to the role of economy, agriculture in economy. And we have been focusing in developing sustainable practices, which include carbon capture, not only mitigating climate impact, but also looking to improve resilience of the sector with climate change. I would like to share with you a short history, a short reference of how this project started. It started in 2023. We started with a simple but ambitious idea in order to increase carbon sequestration under no-till. This was an innovative idea, but then it became an important initiative. It has had the collaboration of several companies that had seen the potential and the impact of our response and helped to create the Puma platform, Bayer, Profertil, and Syngenta. This collaboration has been central for development. Important pillar has been the active participation of farmers that are in the heart of our value chain that have taken commitments to overcome challenges. Our project didn't only grow in terms of reach and results, but it also created a solid collaboration networks, adding many other collaborators, all the names here in the screen. So we are really pleased to share with you our achievements obtained. So you are welcome to explore our progress during the presentations of our speakers. Thank you, Flor, for your introduction. I will speak about the progress that we have made in this project. This is a project which implies a journey to go along together with farmers. The first thing that we ask ourselves is, why should we wait on this topic? Why carbon footprint beyond the fact of soil, carbon that are part of our issues? Any improvement that we do regarding greenhouse gas effects or any improvement that we do in our productive system includes improving the carbon print or working on our carbon print, which has social and environmental impact. Improving the carbon print means improving productivity. Now we have more and more demands on the reduction of these impacts. What you don't measure, you cannot control, so we need tools to develop these strategies, productive strategies, improving productivity in our systems. But we also have environmental goals that are more and more relevant. But last but not least, to anticipate potential demands with local informations. We try to compare the productive systems to other parts in the world. So it is important to have local information so we can anticipate or face or meet that demand. Some years ago, the INTA had meetings with the European Union, and so we created regional groups to work on soybean crop. But the European law include those factors in the values for biofuels import, because reliable and sound and verifiable local information is very important. It also can be correlated with the public-private cooperation to meet the international demand. So we need to have information on our systems or associated to our systems. This first stage in the carbon footprint project was intended to generate information on the carbon footprint in no-till systems in different regions. When we speak about carbon print, we talk about bringing together all the variables associated to the productive process. We include the soil, which is quite complex because we have to consider rotation and other things. But what we do in this first stage was to add all the greenhouse gas effects for planting or production of different crops. When we talk about calculating the carbon footprint, we need to consider what are the criteria that we follow. One of the cornerstones that we have is that we can sustain and support when we talk to our countries, and we need to establish our calculation that is to multiply our productivity by emission factors, the factibility or feasibility data, the data that the grower uses, and we multiply this by emission factors that come from the literature, scientific-based factors. Although in this stage we use values from international literature, we can better adjust these emission factors if we use local factors. We can improve this information in the future. That calculation with this, I need to know what I included with that calculation. If you want to support this, support it for trading objectives or for training, and we need to give precise information, and it has to be comparable. So it has to be accurate enough to allow me to make decisions. It has to be exact and complete. In the case of the project footprint Aapresid, we use the Puma platform to calculate emissions. We included the emissions from different sources. When we are required as certifications, this is based on the use of biofuels, the standards on biofuels, which is the one that is applied for grain trading. We also need to take into account the emissions of harvest residue left in the stubble, It is taken as nitrogen, but it comes back as nitrogen oxide. Also, it has to do with the application of synthetic fertilizer. Also, it has to do with fuel burning in the field. And we have another element which has to do with the production of inputs. When I consume a kilo of plant protection product, somewhere energy or greenhouse gases were emitted for the production of this product. So we don't only consider the direct emissions in the field, but also the emissions that come from the products that we use. If you, as farmers, a customer asks you to provide the carbon footprint, the fields of the emissions are of scope 3. We need to include this in your calculation, the indirect emissions, seed, fertilizer, fuel production, and other kind of products. What Puma gave us is that it has it gives us assurance that the factors are the one used in international environment, so we can be certain that this calculation is supported by international standards. Going to numbers, the project has 7 producers, 11 fields, 6,900 hectares, 14 crops, and 3 periods. This is the scope that our project has had so far. Why we make this background? Because each field has different carbon footprints. It has different productive systems, and so some practices cannot be extrapolated to other areas. And how do we calculate each growing period individually? Because each crop has components of that growing period. If I produce more or less because of climate, this will impact on the calculation of footprint, and this is something that we need to take into account when we analyze the findings. What has been the main challenge that we faced across the project? What data does the farmer have, and with that data, how can we calculate a scientific-based carbon footprint? You never collect data to calculate the carbon footprint. You use the data that you already have there. But if we are probably when we use this footprint, probably you need to fortify a grain for a specific customer, or you want to better manage climate in your field. So you can use this calculation for many things. So you have to come up with the best calculation as possible. So the main challenge is how, using the farmer's data, can we have a clear calculation of carbon footprint, a useful calculation. We had analyzed in 400 labors or tillages in the field, and this is value taking into account fuel consumption, but also the rates of the products that we apply. These 7,000 hectares have about 400 laboring activities. Each of the products that you upload have different composition. It's not the same, the urea or ammonium fertilizers. So each of these this meant that we have to manage more than 100, almost 200 different products, 180. I know what product did the farmer used, and this was the product was applied. So I don't longer will ask the farmer, I will read in the sheet or in the label of the product how was this product used. This is just for you to have an idea of how much information we require for this calculation. In terms of results, what we did was to express the results in two ways. One per hectare to the right and one per ton to the left. Because the use and understanding the footprint has to do with this. We have different products, and we are going to see the profile of these three crops: corn, wheat, and soybean. Basically, our carbon footprint will depend on what this crop needs. We cannot compare wheat with corn. We have to compare wheat with wheat, and we cannot compare one area with another area. And we have to consider the application per hectare. This crop required so many applications per hectare. But this is highly dispersive, because there are some crops that will have more emissions per hectare than others. But if we go to the left, where we have the calculation per ton, here also see that we have higher yields in commercial kilograms. So all these crops are flattened down, or are flat when I make this calculation. We need to optimize the use of nitrogen. Sometimes it is more convenient to use nitrogen in a different way, and this will have a different impact on the carbon footprint calculation. You can access to this QR code to download all this information. When we consider the composition per crop, crops that need high rates of nitrogen, we will consider nitrogen as the main source. So we will have a high percentage that will be associated with that nitrogen application. I don't mean to give back press to the wheat, for instance, or to the corn. I will try to maximize the use of nitrogen in order to produce more grain and to have some advantage in the marginal cost. In crops such as soybean that don't use nitrogen as fertilizer, the production of the crop as a function of inputs, we start to focus on nitrogen. Again, we focus on the use of inputs. When I optimize the carbon footprint, it has to do with the same strategies that you are considering every day to maximize production.
In terms of soil conservation, we all want to conserve the soil because this is related to yield. And when we go to a certification, I'm talking again about the biofuel European directive. By the end of the day, I measure based on produced tons. So if I produce more or less with the same resources, I'm going to be more or less efficient. So we need to have a dual perspective per hectare, but also per ton and yield. To finish, and regarding our project, the idea is to complete 10,000 hectares to complete the 23-24 season. And something that is important and that is also linked to other Aapresid projects, such as the carbon footprint, is modeling carbon on soil in rotation. because we cannot talk about a single crop and a single production. We have to see what happens in the full season, because there is a synergy with the production of both crops. I cannot consider just one crop without knowing what I did or did not do in the other half. On the other hand, we need to get more information, local information. We have to see how we can move on with the carbon program. We discussed this, and there was a round table with Aapresid members, farmers, and I want to know if I'm doing things the right way. So I need to have the right information, and that information needs to be quickly available to tell me whether I'm doing things correctly or not. And the only way to do this is locally. We need to have local information, local data I can use to compare. Well, I think this is it. I think I've not missed anything, so back to you, Flor. Great. Thank you, Sebas, for sharing these first findings of the project, which, as I already said, is a big and ambitious project, a project that, even though it's only starting, we already have a lot of information. Something I also said in another panel is that the key for these projects are data. So I'd like to encourage all of you to participate in the project, to share your data. As Seba said, data are 100% confidential, but without that information, we cannot produce tools or generate products that can be used for management purposes. And in line with this, and in connection with the importance of data, since you are participating in the project today as an engineer, as an advisor, I'd like you to tell us what called your attention, what made you participate and contribute these data, which are so important for us. What is your experience, and what have you been doing in connection with this project? Well, good morning, everyone. Within a sustainability program, you need indicators and tools starting with no-till. And where we have the carbon footprint, the IQ index, that's also measured in the Puma platform, service crops. And we used to measure carbon especially, but the advantage we see in participating in the program is generating information to improve that measurement. And the second important thing is to see what we compare ourselves to, because we go back to the same thing. We measure things at an establishment level, at the total establishment, per hectare, per activity, per crop. So depending on your goal, because if you can say at an establishment level, I want to reduce carbon emissions, well, any crop, for example, grasses, will increase the carbon footprint. So I need to reduce my grasses crops. The measurement that's being done right now is in the southeast of the province of Buenos Aires. So we want to participate in order to learn. The most important thing that we're discussing with them is that you produce a certain amount per ton of crop. Is that good? Is that bad? Am doing things correctly? Let's say I want to improve as compared to what? To myself. Am I doing things the right way or not? Well, the results we had were compared to what happens at the country level. I may be below the average country level, but let's say soybean gives us 3,000 and the country number is 2,000, so that has no value to me. So the goal is to generate information so as to improve, so as to find some reference to improve. And today, someone talked about nitrogenated fertilization. This today has a huge impact on agriculture, on cattle breeding, because it's part of our company includes cattle breeding. But today, now we can do some source differentiation, but until 2019, there was no source differentiation. It is one thing to apply urea in January in the province of Santa Fe than liquid urea in Balcarce. Why isn't it the same? Because the emissions of nitrogen oxide will not be the same, and the nitrogen losses will not be the same either. So participating helps us improve to measure carbon. Thank you, Juan. Your contribution has always been enriching. And this is a question that is in line to the co-create workshop we had yesterday. And one of the goals, one of the demands we noticed in the audience was clear concepts. And this question is about that. Why are you adding the nitrogen oxide molecule in the emissions if it's a molecule with no carbon? Thank you very much for your question. When we quantify greenhouse gas emissions, we do not only talk about carbon. We have dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxide. Those are the relevant gases in the agricultural industry, and there are other gases as well. Hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, these are gas families, especially for refrigeration, foam, polyurethane, and another gas which is sulfur hexafluoride. But when we face climate change, we have to understand that all those gases go into the atmosphere, and those gases contribute to radioactive forcing, that is, the energy coming from the sun rebounds on the earth, changes that wave longitude, and when it wants to leave the atmosphere, it goes against these gases. They have their mean life in the atmosphere, which changes. So internationally, a metric was defined, that is the international organization, the IPCC, that is made up of all countries. Argentina has several representatives at the IPCC, and it sets a common metric for all countries to be able to compare themselves. Nitrogen oxide has some radiation forcing. If I do not apply that nitrogen, that gas will not be there, or if I do not produce more dry matter. When I have a crop, I produce more than what is naturally produced. That is what we quantify. As I was saying, it's not that nitrogen oxide is there. Well, it is in the atmosphere, but it's not the main gas. And when I take nitrogen from the oxide and I return nitrogen oxide in a different ratio, it's not the same ratio. This is why we quantify the nitrogen cycles. This is why efficiency is important too when talking about volatility or losses or different applications. What we're actually doing is becoming more efficient. If I can use that nitrogen better so that it will go where it has to go and so that it will not be lost through volatility, then I will be working more efficiently. Well, if there are no further questions, we will close our panel. But first, I'd like to thank you both for your commitment, your responsibility. I think there is another question. Do we have time for another question? It's the reason for it. If we want to be part of a project to contribute data and start managing environmental indicators, what should we do? You can get directly in touch with me. I'm coordinating the network. We'll tell you what the project is about, what data we're managing and what data we need. And based on that, we'll start having a conversation going back and forth. We'll be getting information, giving you information, and you can get in touch with me. You will find me on Aapresid's website or just reach out once this session is over. Well, this is it. Thank you, everyone.